Hello all, and welcome back to Tangents on Cracked Spines. Or welcome if it's the first time you're listening. I am your host, Frankie. You may or may not hear my mother. I have given her permission to be a part of this podcast officially, but she does not want to be on the visual side of it. And if audio sounds worse than usual, I managed to lose my microphone. So I apologize. So, things have happened. It's been a long time since I last started. This is going to be my last time trying to read Dracula by Bram Stoker. Because every time I start it, life kind of goes to hell. The one time I hurt my back, the next time my mother broke her ankle during a freak ice storm and needed surgery and was laid up in a wheelchair for 3 months. It was a lot. I was unemployed. I was then working 2 jobs and had no time off, and now I am back to 1 job that everything is going pretty well for, luckily. So, without much more ado, I'm going to try this again. If life hits the fan again, I'm moving on to another book and calling Dracula cursed. I am again starting from the beginning because I feel like with months in between, I wouldn't do starting where I was any justice. That's why I keep restarting. This will be my last time with it, though. I will either get through the book, or things will get better. Or, we're moving on. One of the two. I'm good at low light, but nope. I put these on for a reason. There we go. Light. Let there be light. For those of you watching this on YouTube, I apologize for the sudden lens flare. But I would like to be able to read my book. Which, look! It's a physical book! It's not, my cell phone for a change. We begin. Dracula by Bram Stoker. Chapter 1. Jonathan Harker's journal kept in shorthand. 3 May, Bistritz left Munich at 8:35 p.m. on 1st May, arriving at Vienna early next morning. Should have arrived at 6:46, but train was an hour late. Budapest seems a wonderful place. From the glimpse which I got of it from the train and the little I could walk through the streets, I feared to go very far from the station, as we arrived late and would start as near the correct time as possible. The impression I had was that we were leaving the west and entering the east, the most western of splendid bridges over the Danube. Ha, I think I said it right this time.
Danube.
So, I know Blue Danube, I know, and the other times I have read this, my mom has cracked up laughing because in written form, I have been messing this up every time. We're good. I got past it. Which is here of noble width and depth, took us among the traditions of Turkish rule. We left in pretty good time and came after nightfall to Klausenberg. Here I stopped for the night at the Hotel Royal. I had for dinner, or rather supper, a chicken done up some way with red pepper, which was very good, but thirsty. I make comments about that every time. I'm just going to leave it there. Memo. Get recipe from Mina. I asked the waiter, and he said it was called paprika Hendel. and that, as it was a national dish, I should be able to get it anywhere along the Carpathians. I found my smattering of German very useful here. Indeed, I don't know how I should be able to get on without it. Having had some time at my disposal when in London, I had visited the British Museum and made search among the books and maps in the library regarding Transylvania. It had struck me that some foreknowledge of the country could hardly fail to have some importance in dealing with a nobleman of that country. I found that the district he named is in the extreme east of the country, just on the borders of 3 states, Transylvania, Moldavia, and Bukvania. In the midst of the Carpathian Mountains, one of the wildest and least known portions of Europe. I was not able to light on any map or work giving the exact locality of the castle Dracula, as there are no maps of this country as yet to compare with our own ordained survey maps. But I found that Bistritz, the post town named by Count Dracula, is a fairly well-known place. I shall enter here some of my notes, as they may refresh my memory when I talk over my travels with Mina. In the population of Transylvania, there are 4 distinct nationalities: Saxons in the south, and mixed with them the Wallachs, who are the descendants of the Dracians, Magyars of the west, and Zekels of the east and north. If I mispronounce any of this, by all means let me know. I am more than aware that I'm an American who is terrible with reading names from other countries. I am going among the latter, who claim to be descended from Attila and the Huns. This may be so, for when the Magyars conquered the country in the 11th century, they found the Huns settled in it. I read that every known superstition in the world is gathered into the horseshoe of the Carpathians, as if it were the center of some sort of imaginative whirlpool. If so, my stay may be very interesting. Oh, no. My page came out.
Oh, no.
That's not how I want to mark my progress. I know it's a paperback and a used one at that, but... Memo. I must ask the Count all about them. I did not sleep well, though my bed was comfortable enough, for I had all sorts of queer dreams. There was a dog howling all night under my window, which may have had something to do with it. Or it may have been the paprika, for I had to drink up all the water in my carafe and was still thirsty. Towards morning I slept and was wakened by the continuous knocking at my door, so I guess I must have been sleeping soundly then. I had for breakfast more paprika and a sort of porridge of maize flour, which they said was mamaliga, and eggplant stuffed with forcemeat, a very excellent dish, which they called implatata. Memo. Get this recipe also. I had to hurry breakfast, for the train started a little before 8, or rather, it ought to have done so, for after rushing to the station at 7:30, I had to sit in the carriage for more than an hour before we began to move. It seems to me that the further east you go, the more unpunctual are the trains. What ought they to be in China? All day long we seemed to dawdle through a country which was full of beauty of every kind. Sometimes we saw little towns or castles on the top of steep hills, such as we see in old missals. Sometimes we ran by rivers and streams which seemed from the wide stony margin on each side of them to be subject to great floods. It takes a lot of water and running strong to sweep the outside edge of a river clear. Pardon. Had a tickle in my throat. Didn't want y'all to hear it. Where was I?
Sitting in a coach.
Daughter, great floods. Ticks. At every station, there were groups of people, sometimes crowds, and in all sorts of attire. Some of them were just like the peasants at home, or those I saw coming through France and Germany, with short jackets and round hats and homemade trousers, but others were very picturesque. The women looked pretty, except when you got near them they were very clumsy about the waist. They had all full white sleeves of some kind or other, and the most of them had big belts with a lot of strips of something fluttering from them, like the dresses in a ballet, but of course there were petticoats under them. The strangest figures we saw were the Slavics, who were more barbarian than the rest, with their big cowboy hats, great baggy dirty white trousers, white linen shirts, and enormous heavy leather belts, nearly a foot wide, all studded over with brass nails. They wore high boots, with their trousers tucked into them, and they had very long black hair and heavy black mustaches. They were very picturesque, but do not look prepossessing. I can read, I promise. Prepossessing. On the stage, they would be set down at once as some old Oriental band of brigands. They are, however, I am told, very harmless and rather wanting in natural self-assertion. It was on the dark side of twilight when we got to Bistritz, which is a very interesting old place, being practically on the frontier, for the Bargo Pass leads from it into Bukovania. Bukovania? I don't know. It's my third time reading this. I should have looked things up. It has had a very stormy existence, and it certainly shows marks of it. 50 years ago, a series of great fires took place, which made terrible havoc on 5 separate occasions. At the very beginning of the 17th century, it underwent a siege of 3 weeks and lost 13,000 people, the casualties of war proper being assisted by famine and disease. Can I help you, Mineki? I have a cat rubbing on my feet.
She says, I want the ball of yarn back that I stole from you.
You're not allowed the bowl of yarn back. Count Dracula had directed me to go to the Golden Crone Hotel, which I found, to my great delight, to be thoroughly old-fashioned. For, of course, I wanted to see all I could of the ways of the country. I was evidently expected, for when I got near the door, I faced a cheery-looking elderly woman in the usual peasant dress, white undergarment with long double apron, front and back, of colored stuff fitting almost too tight for modesty. When I came close, she bowed and said, "The Englishman?" "Yes," I said, "I am John Harker." She smiled and gave some message to an elderly man in white shirt sleeves who had followed her to the door. He went, but immediately returned with the letter. "My friend, welcome to the Carpathians. I am anxiously expecting you. Sleep well tonight. At 3 tomorrow the diligence will start for Bukovina. A place on it is kept for you. At the Bargo Pass my carriage will await you and will bring you to me. I trust that your journey from London has been a happy one, and that you will enjoy your stay in my beautiful land. Your friend, Dracula." 4th May. I found that my landlord had got a letter from the Count directing him to secure the best place on the coach for me, but on making inquiries as to details, he seemed somewhat reticent, and pretended that he could not understand my German. Trash picker. I was talking to my cat. This could not be true because up to then, he had understood it perfectly. At least, he answered my questions exactly as if he did. He and his wife, the old lady who had received me, looked at each other in a frightened sort of way. He mumbled out that the money had been sent in a letter, and that was all he knew. When I asked him if he knew Count Dracula and could tell me anything of his castle, both he and his wife crossed themselves. God damn it. I'm gonna have a whole new book of Dracula by the time I'm done with this.
Please tell me they're coming out after you've read them.
Yes.
We'll fix it when you're done.
Both he and his wife crossed themselves, and saying that they knew nothing at all, simply refused to speak further. It was so near the time of starting that I had no time to ask anyone else, for it was all very mysterious and not by any means comforting. This is a little late and shows that it's been a while since I've podcasted. I am very sorry, but classic tales, while I do read pretty exclusively from the public domain, classic tales are not necessarily appropriate for all listeners. I try to keep my profanities to myself. They do sometimes slip through. Listener discretion is advised. If you live in the Western world in the 21st century, I'm sure you know what Dracula is and that it is bloody and a little risque in places. But I still need to give the announcement. Listener discretion is advised. Thank you. Before we actually get to Dracula's castle.
Yeah. You definitely need a disclaimer then.
Now I need to readjust my light. And give everybody lens flare. Dum, 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 dum. Just before I was leaving, the old lady came up to my room and said in a very hysterical way, "Oh, must you go? Oh, young heir, must you go?" She was in such an excited state that she seemed to have lost her grip of what German she knew and mixed it all up with some other language which I did not know at all. I was just able to follow her by asking many questions. When I told her that I must go at once and that I was engaged on important business, she asked again. "Do you know what day it is?" I answered that it was the 4th of May. She shook her head and said again, "Oh yes, I know that, but do you know what day it is?" On my saying that I did not understand, she went on. "It is the eve of St. George's Day. Do you not know that tonight, when the clock strikes midnight, all the evil things in the world will have full sway? Do you know where you are going? And what you are going to?" She was in such evident distress that I tried to comfort her, but without effect. Finally, she went down on her knees and implored me not to go, at least wait a day or two before starting. It was all very ridiculous, but I did not feel comfortable. However, there was business to be done, and I could allow nothing to interfere with it. I therefore tried to raise her up, and said as gravely as I could that I thanked her, but my duty was imperative and that I must go. She then rose and dried her eyes, and taking a crucifix from her neck, offered it to me. I did not know what to do, for as an English churchman, I have been taught to regard such things in some measure idolatrous, and yet it seemed so ungracious to refuse an old lady meaning so well and in such a state of mind. She saw, I suppose, the doubt in my face, for she put the rosary around my neck and said, "For your mother's sake," and went out of the room. I am writing up this part of the diary whilst I am waiting for the coach, which is, of course, late, and the crucifix is still round my neck. Whether it is the old lady's fear, or the many ghostly traditions of this place, or the crucifix itself, I do not know. But I am not feeling nearly as easy in my mind as usual. If this book should ever reach Mina before I do, let it bring my goodbye. Here comes the coach. Can I do the 5th of May? We'll see how far I get. 5th May, the castle. The gray of the morning has passed, and the sun is high over the distant horizon, which seems jagged. Whether with trees or hills, I know not, for it is so far off that big things and little things are mixed. I am not sleepy, and, as I am not to be called till I awake, did I miss something? No. Okay. Wake. Naturally, I write till sleep comes. There are many odd things to put down, and lest who reads them may fancy that I dined too well before I left Bistritz. Let me put down my dinner exactly. I dined on what they called robber steak. Bits of bacon, onion, and beef, seasoned with red pepper and strung on sticks and roasted over the fire, in the simple style of the London's cat's meat, which I have mentioned before, but will mention again that it was meat meant to feed cats, not meat made of cats. And nowadays, we would probably just call a kebab shish kebab, not doner kebab. Which I found out is something else entirely, and I don't like it because doner kebab reminds me of Donner Party, so now that I've had that little tangent. But this is called Tangents on Cracked Spines. I'm not sure I actually introduced the title of this time.
I thought you did.
But, you should understand that I'm here to make tangents. Shish kebab. The wine was golden Mediash, which produces a queer sting on the tongue, which is, however, not disagreeable. I had only a couple of glasses of this and nothing else. Only a couple glasses of wine, no big deal. Although, to be fair, water wasn't the drink of choice most of the time at that time. Also, I don't think you can see my thing. Happy Pride! Need to say that. Happy Pride! Dum, ba-dum, bum, bum. When I got on the coach, the driver had not taken his seat, and I saw him talking with the landlady. They were evidently talking of me, for every now and then they looked at me, and some of the people who were sitting on the bench outside the door, which they call by a name meaning word-bearer, came and listened, and then looked at me, most of them pityingly. I could hear a lot of words often repeated, queer words, for there were many nationalities in the crowd, so I quietly got my polyglot dictionary from my bag and looked them out. I must say they were not cheering to me, for amongst them were Ordog, Satan, Pokul, Hell, Stragosia, witch, Vrolok, and Volkschak, both of which mean the same thing, one being Slavic and the other Servian, for something that is either werewolf or vampire. Memo. Must ask the Count about these superstitions. When we started, the crowd round the inn door, which had by this time swelled to a considerable size, all made the sign of the cross and pointed 2 fingers toward me. With some difficulty, I got a fellow passenger to tell me what they meant. He would not answer at first, but On learning that I was English, he explained that it was a charm to guard against the evil eye. This was not very pleasant for me, just starting for an unknown place to meet an unknown man, and everyone seemed so kind-hearted, and so sorrowful, and so sympathetic, that I could not but be touched. I shall never forget the last glimpse which I had of the inn-yard, and its crowd of picturesque figures, all crossing themselves as they stood round the wide archway, with its background of rich foliage of oleander and orange trees and green tubs clustered in the center of the yard. Then our driver, whose wide linen drawers covered the whole front of the box seat, Gotza, they called them, cracked his big whip over his 4 small horses, which ran abreast, and we set off on our journey. I soon lost sight and recollection of ghostly fears and the beauty of the scene as we drove along, although had I known the language, or rather languages, which my fellow passengers were speaking, I might not have been able to throw them off so easily. Before us lay a green sloping land full of forests and woods, with here and there steep hills crowned with clumps of trees or with farmhouses, the blank gable end to the road. There was everywhere a bewildering mass of fruit blossom, apple, plum, pear, cherry, and as we drove by, I could see the green grass under the trees spangled with fallen petals. In and out amongst these green fills of what they call here the Mittelland, ran the road, losing itself as it swept round the grassy curve, or was shut out by the strangling ends of pine woods, which here and there ran down the hillside like tongues of flame. The road was rugged, but still we seemed to fly over it with a feverish haste. I could not understand then what the haste meant, but the driver was evidently bent on losing no time in reaching Borgo Prund. I was told that this road is in summertime excellent, but that it had not yet been put in order after the winter snows. In this respect it is different from the general runs of roads in the Carpathians, for it is an old tradition that they are not to be kept in too good order. Of old, the hospodars would not repair them, lest the Turks should think they were preparing to bring in foreign troops, and so hasten the war, which was always really at loading point. Beyond the green swelling hills of the Mittelland rose mighty slopes of forest, up to the lofty steeps of the Carpathians themselves. Right and left up of us they towered, with the afternoon sun falling full upon them and bringing out all the glorious colors of this beautiful range, deep blue and purple in the shadows of the peaks, green and brown where brass and rock mingled, and an endless perspective of jagged rock and pointed crags, till these were themselves lost in the distance. Where the snowy peaks rose grandly, here and there seemed mighty rifts in the mountains, through which, as the sun began to sink, we saw now and again the white gleam of falling water. One of my companions touched my arm as we swept round the base of a hill and opened up the lofty snow-covered peak of a mountain, which seemed, as we wound on our serpentine way, to be right before us. "Look, Eastern Zek, God's seat," and he crossed himself reverently. As we wound on our endless way, and the sun sank lower and lower behind us, the shadows of the evening began to creep round us. This was emphasized by the fact that the snowy mountain top still held the sunset and seemed to glow with a delicate cool pink. Here and there we passed Czechs and Slavics, all in picturesque attire, but I noticed that goiter was painfully prevalent. By the roadside were many crosses, and as we swept by, my companions all crossed themselves. Here and there was a peasant man or woman kneeling before a shrine, who did not even turn round as we approached, but seemed in the self-surrender of devotion to have neither eyes nor ears for the outer world. There were many things new to me, for instance, hay-ricks in the trees, and here and there very beautiful masses of weeping birch, their white stems shining like silver through the delicate green of the leaves. Now and again we passed a leiter wagon, the ordinary peasant's cart, with its long snake-like vertebra, calculated to suit the inequalities of the road. On this were sure to be seated quite a group of homecoming peasants, the Czechs with their white, the Slavics with their colored sheepskins. There was an extra comma. My apologies. The latter carrying lance fashion their long staves with axe at the end. As the evening fell, it began to get very cold, and the growing twilight seemed to merge onto one dark mistiness of gloom, of the trees, oak, beech, and pine, though in the valleys which ran deep between the spurs of the hills, as we ascended through the pass, the dark firs stood out here and there against the background of the late-lying snow. Sometimes, as the road was cut through the pine woods that seemed in the gray... I'm not dyslexic. That seemed in the darkness to be closing down upon us great masses of grayness, which here and there bestowed the trees, produced a peculiarly weird and solemn effect, which carried on the thoughts of and grim fancies engendered earlier in the evening, when the falling sunset threw into strange relief the ghost-like clouds, which amongst the Carpathians seemed to wind ceaselessly through the valleys. Sometimes the hills were so steep that, despite our driver's haste, the horses could only go slowly. I wished to get down and walk up them as we do at home, but the driver would not hear of it. No, he said, you must not walk here. The dogs are too fierce. And then he added, with what he evidently meant for grim pleasantry, for he looked around to catch the approving smile of the rest, and you may have enough of such matters before you go to sleep. The only stop we would make was a moment's pause to light his lamps. And with that, we will wait until next week. Now, I will not guarantee any schedule because my day job is moving buildings and my schedule is all sorts of wonky. But theoretically over the weekend, next weekend, I will do another chapter or two. I'm not even through the first chapter. Another couple journal entries. I did get through the majority of the portion I like to deem Jonathan Harker's travel blog. But we're not fully done it yet. And yes, do you like my wigs in the background? So yeah. Thank you all for listening. I hope that my blathering on wasn't too much for you, and nor were my terrible pronunciations. I will have to figure out a better way to read aloud from a physical book, such as actually grabbing a ruler to keep my place. Otherwise, have a great week, everyone. And again, happy Pride. Happy belated solstice if you... Was it a solstice or was it a equinox? It was a solstice, yeah?
Summer solstice.
I only, celebrate the solstices and equinoxes, and can I keep them straight? Never. Happy belated solstice, and happy strawberry moon, or whatever you call it wherever you're from. Thank you again, and good night!